Hello and welcome to day 20. My setup might look a little bit different. I actually had to lower my desk and sit because I hurt my foot somehow, so I apologize if if it's not quite the same view as usual. I'm trying to make sure I can still fit my entire palette in here so you can see what I'm doing when we paint. Okay, and I will try to remember not to move this out of camera. It's like in the middle of my desk instead of closer to me, which is a little tricky, but that's where it needs to be for the filming purposes. That's where my camera sits. Okay, so we're gonna paint a gingerbread house today. And of course, there's lots of different ways that we can do the gingerbread house, lots of different designs. I wanna go, somewhat realistic, have a nice, pretty gingerbread house, but you're welcome to make the changes that you need to make it look like, something somebody in your family might have made, or something if you choose. Sorry, I have to sneeze. Let me pause the video. All right, no luck there. I tried. Okay, so we're just gonna do a quick rough sketch just to get the shape of the house down, and then we'll jump in and do our paintings. It's gonna be a little similar to the gingerbread house, our gingerbread cookies we did before, like getting that base color in and then adding some shadows and things like that. So let's get started. I am looking at some different reference photos just so I have something to kind of look at while we get this set up to make it more realistic, but it doesn't matter. You just want to get the nice, shape of like a house, three-dimensional. We could do it straight on, but that tends to make it look a lot more flat. And so I'm trying to do kind of an angled house, which I know can be a little bit harder to sketch. I'm just drawing in some lines, making this look nice and thick, like the edge of a nice thick cookie there. Go at a slight angle. These lines should be kind of trying to meet at some point off there. And then this one as well. I don't want it to be too big, so we'll cut that there. We'll cut that there. Like, it's a nice small gingerbread house. And depending on how your gingerbread house, how you want it to be, you could have it sit on a plate or on more flat cookie. I did see one picture reference where there's like a base that's like a square here that the house kind of sits on, which is kind of fun. I bet my kids would love that if I actually had one like that, but when we do ours, and we haven't done our gingerbread houses yet. I don't know about you guys. Ours is coming up, I think, this weekend. It's hard making it work around everybody's schedule. Okay, and there's just like a little, that's our table. Actually, I don't want to put that there because then it looks like our gingerbread house is falling off the table. Yeah, but so to do your lines, you kind of just want to have like an imaginary dot out here, and all the lines are going toward it, and that gives it the feeling that it's going away. A little perspective lesson there. If our paper was bigger, we could like draw the dot, and then we would use a ruler and make sure all the lines are going toward that dot. And actually, unless I have my dot way up here, this part needs to come down a little bit, but I don't have an actual dot on here, so it's just a rough sketch, and it's fine if it's not perfect. And so we'll just get the base color and everything in. I will say it might be easier unless you plan on going really, really light, to kind of plan out where you might put some things. Like maybe if you could plan on making like a little icing wreath or something here, draw that in. Maybe it's a lifesaver. Maybe create a little door, some windows. Just have some idea of what you want on your house, because if we can avoid them to make them fit better color-wise, we want to do that. If we fill everything in with the brown gingerbread color, it can be a little harder. If we can use bleed proof white to add in our snow, but adding in those other colors, they're going to be affected by the color of the gingerbread house. And so where we want the green to go and stuff, if we can avoid that, it can be helpful. Okay, and then how you decorate is up to you. I'm looking at a picture where it's got a bunch of little like candies on the roof. I know a lot of kids like to put a bunch of candies on the roof, little pattern or something. I know my kids always use a gumdrop for the chimney, if we have gumdrops. And so just sketching some of the things that you're going to use, and then we'll soften up some of these lines here in a bit. But I'd also like to use little like mini candy canes on either side of the door. I'm gonna have them face the other way though. So for this one, I'm kind of doing a mix of realistic like using a reference photo. I'm doing a mix of using a reference photo, but then also kind of trying to create my own thing here a little bit. And so we don't want to spend all day sketching though. We want to get painting. Even if you don't have all your details on there, that's fine. We can add some later, like I said. Mainly the big colors, anything that you want to use different colors on, and you don't want the colors to get muddy. You just want to have some idea of what's going where and why. So I know that I'm probably going to use a good bit of white up here for the snow. So I'm going to try to avoid like the edges of it, but this color that I'm going to use here is some that I already had mixed. It's some burnt umber, or raw umber, with a little bit of the burnt sienna. Both, I believe, are Mission Gold paints. You can use different brands, but they're just going to look slightly different. Each brand has their own formula for the colors they make, and while they're similar, they're not always exactly the same. So I'm going to fill in my house here, and I'm going to kind of avoid this little circle area that I have for a wreath of some sort. And I'm just going to kind of I'm making kind of a rough edge, not a bumpy edge, like, because there's going to be probably some icing there, and we'll add some shadows and stuff in a bit. I'm going to have a candy cane here next to this doorway. So I'm avoiding that so I can do like a broken candy cane there. And I'm avoiding the door because I'm going to have it be an icing door that they're going to add to there. And so I'm just following this along to the edge. Perfect. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and go to the side. I'm going to add a little bit of sepia to this color I already mixed. I'm going to make this look a little darker because it's in shadow, because it's off to the side. I'm going to avoid those windows, although it won't matter that much. I just want to remember where I put them basically. But we'll probably use a black or a dark color to show the hole where the windows are. And so it won't be as important that they're left clear, because our dark paint can go over any of the other paints. Okay. And then, perhaps I should have done this part before I added so much shadow. some more of the raw umber and the burnt sienna. I'm just going to paint little bits of color that might kind of stick out in spots. This is going to be like covered in icing, but you know, whenever you ice, unless you're perfect at it, there will still be some bits of the cookie showing, and we can always go over some of this with bleed proof white for our icing. And so it's okay if it's not perfect. We just want to kind of mark up where our gingerbread house is, basically. Okay. And while this is still, even if it's still a little wet, I'm going to drop in just another little bit of a layer kind of right under where I know there's going to be snow hanging, because it casts a shadow on this little bit of cookie. This is where icing is, but it's going to be darker in the middle there. Okay, even this darker bit, yeah, it's all in shadow, but the part right under here is going to be slightly darker shadow. Okay, that part's done. I'm going to decide what color I want my little gumdrop chimney to be. I'm going to go with a green, I think. I'm going to use this green that I have, but I'm going to add some yellow to it because this green is not very green. I know my yellow looks dirty. You just got to get that top layer off. And since I'm mixing it with a green anyway, I'm not too worried about it having green in it. I'm going to use even a tiny bit of the perylene green just because I'm trying to get a more basic green, which is not a color I typically use, but gumdrops come in a more basic green than in the olivey green that I tend to be drawn for. But see, that's where it's our painting. We can pretend that there's a gumdrop in the color that we like if we don't want to use a generic color that it's in. It's our thing, so we're allowed to decide. But I'm just filling in that gumdrop. I'm also going to go ahead and do the green down here that I'm going to do for my icing. I'm kind of sloppily adding little bits as if the icing was piped in a weird way to kind of look like leaves for a wreath. And then I will make my door be red, which is going to blend in a little bit with my candy canes, but I feel like that's okay. So I am going to add in my red door. I went over where the knob is, and that's okay. We can add like a little pop of color if we want for the doorknob. Make it look like they attached like a little M&M or something for our gingerbread house. I will say this looks a little too perfect. Like if it was iced on there, it would probably get pretty messy, but that's the beauty of it. It's a painting and we can make it look more perfect than real life. But I am gonna take, I need probably a liner brush for this part. I'm gonna create little candy cane stripes on the side. I want this piece to look like either candy cane stripes, or I know when we do gingerbread houses, my kids sometimes use pretzel sticks, which could be fun. But for this, I'm just gonna do a few little curvy stripes that look a little like a candy cane. And then on this side, I'm going to have it, the stripes go the opposite way. And again, this part, I don't have a picture of this. It's not photo realistic. I'm not using a reference. I'm kind of making it up as I go. And so it might look better or worse because of that. I'm going to just add a touch more of the gingerbread color in there and along the back here. We'll have our snow here in a bit. This here is some of the sepia mixed with the perylene. Not perylene, I always do that. I mix them up with the Sodalite Genuine to create a sort of black color. I'm trying to make it so we're not mixing too terribly many colors. That could be something we work on in the future if you're interested. Dab my brush a little bit. And I'm just filling in the shadow of our little cutouts of our windows. Okay, I also need a tiny bit of shadow on the side where my candy cane is. Because if it's three-dimensional and sticking out there, it would stick out a bit more there. Okay. I also need some like right over here on this side. I'm going based on because the shadows on this side of the house, so the shadows on all these things will be on the same side of those things. And so using that as my guideline for these things. I also probably need to make sure this looks like it's sticking out a bit. Give it some three-dimensionality. Since I didn't leave space for a doorknob here, I might even just go brown and make it look like an M&M. A brown little M&M that was attached. I will add a little touch of maybe some white icing, or we can assume we did the red icing, but to the around it so it looks like it was stuck on. I'm actually going to probably do the same thing on the candy canes. It looks like it was stuck on with icing. And that makes sense because otherwise right now my little things here, my door doesn't make a lot of sense right now because I don't know what made the door. That's my fault. Yeah, in the future, if I plan this again, I will try to do it after like my kids have already decorated a gingerbread house, so I could use one of their gingerbread houses as like a reference to make it a little more realistic looking. But for now, this is what I have, and it's not terrible. I will say for this, for the roof over here, if we want to do it like their little colorful candies, we want to grab a few different colors and fill those circles in. This one has got a few different, like there's some yellow circles, and then there will be some areas that are darker, so we'll have to do some shadows in a bit. And I'm not really sure what candies these are supposed to be. They almost look like maybe like, oh, what were those, like sprees? Does that make sense? I don't know. That's what they look like to me, if I'm thinking of the right thing. But yeah, trying to, and be careful if you're painting more than one. Like right now, I'm trying to go into this one, and it's a tight fit, and I don't want to touch the yellow one, or I'm gonna I'm gonna have that color sticking out or blending into the other color if they're too close. So just something to be aware of. If you don't want them to blend out, you might want to take a minute before you do all those. Give it time for them to dry before you do the colors next to another color. that one I accidentally touched, and so that red is going to go into my yellow a little bit. I am going to just dry my brush as much as I can and kind of lift the red out. It's not an exact science, but it might help a bit. And let's see. I will use some more green in here. Again, it might be better being impatient and trying to keep this video short and not have you sitting around waiting too long, but it might be better to wait so you don't do that. Or use a smaller brush. Again, I'm going to lift the green out. And I'm getting to show a little bit of how to do that. But even there, you see this, it worked temporarily, but the green is still going to bleed in because it is still wet. So we can try to add in the yellow color later, and it might help, but it also might not. And that's, oh well, it is what it is. We'll make it work. But here I am going again because I have learned nothing. Just trying to steer clear of those. And really, if there's a space in between them, that's fine, because then they look like they're realistically kind of stuck on here and it's not a big deal. But definitely be careful where they are. And it may look like they're not touching, but then they do touch. It's one of those things where it's kind of hard to tell. You're like, oh, I'm good. And then, oh no, they got too close. They must have touched. So, and if we just have some that are orange, then so be it. That's an extra color too, because they combined. But yeah, so here we have just an assortment of yellow, green, blue, multicolored things on this roof. I think it looks kind of cool. And we'll add some shadows and stuff to make it look more like candy. The only thing I might suggest is adding some white, either here, like the icing is holding it up, or adding some other fun candy type colors, or however you want to paint yours. Some of them I think have a lot more candy coatings on them all around. Some do not. I was trying to keep it simple, so I didn't put as much candy around the edges and stuff. And we're going to use some bleed proof white here in a minute to do some details to the snow. We'll add some shadows to make it look a little more realistic, and then we can what is it? I forget where I was going with that. I don't know. I completely lost my train of thought. But we'll get some details going on this, and I think that will help pull it all together. I'm gonna add just a few drops of nice bright red to be icing cherries or holly berries on our wreath. Okay. Another thing you can do if you want, I know like when my kids do their gingerbread houses, a lot of times they like to create like a little walkway here, and they use the little like small candies. And so we can do something similar to the roof, but on the ground here. And maybe be better at avoiding the colors, unless we want them to blend in. Sometimes I think the blending in looks fun, and it gives it a more loose style. It just kind of depends on what you're going for. If you want that more realistic style, then you don't want them to blend in as much, and so you definitely want to give them time to dry before you add more. So I'm going to let those dry a tiny bit before I add in other colors, just so you can see a little bit of what it looks like. And we'll just, I think I'm going to go ahead and add in some of the bleed proof white details. So just get some water in your paint to help it move. I don't know if that's in the camera. I did start filming, right? Because that would be a shame. Okay. Just have to make sure we're staying in view. I would hate to spend all this time painting and then have to redo it. Okay, so I'm gonna take the bleed proof white and kind of cover all the areas where I think it needs to be white, like icing, just because even though the paper is already white, I feel like it will make more sense if we add in all the bleed proof white. Then our icing is all that similar bright color, and it will make, I think, a little more sense as to what's going on. I mean, we could avoid it altogether. Just add some shadows and stuff, and it would probably have the same general effect. I'm also gonna have this look like the icing is kind of going up around my gumdrop there because and I'm creating little bits here, and we can go, because the bleed proof white is water activated, we can add some shadows and stuff to the bleed proof white too here in just a bit. So it'll help us create that more realistic look to our gingerbread house, the icing details. Especially down here, we want it to kind of, we don't want it to be perfect at the edge there. We want it to look like the icing is kind of falling off in spots, because realistically, very few people can do a very detailed and perfect straight line with their icing. I will say my painting abilities do not translate into decorating abilities. My gingerbread houses are usually nowhere near perfect, and that's okay. So I'm just adding more. I am gonna add like a little hint of the icing along the sides, so it shows that those pieces are attached there, and the icing is kind of sticking out a bit. We can use some shadow details to help. I'm also going to put like little bits of the icing sticking out on either side of this, the candy canes, so it looks like they were stuck on, and it's squeezed out of it. Just to give it that realistic texture and whatnot. And I'm also gonna have some bits of icing kind of sticking up over where the house is sitting on this little piece here, because realistically I feel like that would happen as well. A little bit back here. And once we get this all on there, we can work on some shadows, like I said, for our icing and just other various things. I'm gonna include a little bit of icing, because I feel like even if this is icing, we'd still have some white icing. If anything, it looks like snow. Okay. All right. For this red door, I'm actually going to take a little bit of the red, and I'm going to kind of do some like streaks, like it's to try to make it look like it was icing and it was spread on there and it's not like a solid even piece. If I could make it look like it was like a candy of some sort, I would, but I can't think of a candy that's flat and red. So I just want to give it maybe some more texture so it looks like icing sticking up. I'm also going to do some red candies down here, or this section down here. I let all that stuff kind of get situated. The yellow is fairly dry. I'll get some greens here in a bit. The other thing we can do is take some sepia and burnt sienna to create like a brown, that darker color for our gingerbread houses, where we're gonna do some shadow. And I'm gonna create some shadows under, like where the snow icing, where the icing meets the gingerbread houses, because I want it to look like a shadow so that the icing looks like it's sitting on top of the cookie instead of just being part of it. If that makes sense. And I'm kind of playing around with the different colors, especially over here. It's a lot darker anyway in general, but we want it to be really darker where that snow touches and is draping over. Darker right under there. On this side, I think some of this is the underside over there, so it's going to be dark because it's the underside of that cookie that's hanging over there, if that makes sense. So you just need more shadow there. The other thing we can do is get a little bit of a light kind of a gray and kind of just add it in little bits of the snow on here to be shadows. Just little bits here and there to show that it's not like a even spreading. The shadows show that it was kind of jumbled on there. It's not a flat surface, it's textured because of the way the snow was applied, the icing. Okay. And even over here, getting some shadows from there. Okay. I'm going to use a bit of shadow here just for our gumdrop. Our little candies use like a darker color of the color you had to kind of do like just along the edges to make it look thick. You can use a very tiny bit of it, the complement of each color. So like red, the complement is green. Put a tiny bit of green in the red and it will mute it to make a really nice shadow color. Okay, and you can do the same but opposite for the reds. Create a shadow color. I mean, for the greens, you use red mixed in a little bit, and it makes a nice shadow color for the green. Okay, and the last thing I'm gonna do is just add some of that green, the green little candy colors for our path down here. I think it blends in nicely. But like I said, you can paint whatever candies you want. Just try to add some shadows to them to make it look three-dimensional. But otherwise, there we go. And again, it's not perfect. I could actually, if you really wanted to be a little realistic, I would give some hints of these colors, the candy colors on the other side to kind of indicate that there might be candies on that side as well. I mean, unless you're just decorating part of the gingerbread house, you would probably have little hints of color showing on that side too. Not a lot, you wouldn't see much, you would only see maybe a hint of it. But that just gives us the impression that the other side of this house looks a lot like this. Okay. And there we go. Not perfect, but a nice, simple little gingerbread house, which can be fun. And you can create all sorts of different ones. Angle your house so it's facing a different direction. Add some different shapes. I know we get a kit that has a bunch of different shaped houses. One's just like a triangular chalet, as they call it. But they're fun little things. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Sorry, as I was saying goodbye, I just noticed I would also add some shadows on this little bit of icing along the sides. I kind of brushed over those and forgot about them, and especially on this side because there's a bit deep shadow on that side. You don't want it to be bright stark white, or it would it doesn't fit as well. So you just want to kind of shadow some of that white there. But there we go. I hope you had fun. If you gave it a try, let me know. I'd love to see how yours turned out and anything that you made changes to. I'd love to see the different creativity and things you can share here or over on my Instagram. I would love to know what you thought. And I will hopefully be back for day 21 tomorrow. This was an ambitious task trying to film every day, and I'm noticing that it's difficult. We've had a few snow days that put me behind my filming schedule, so I'm not quite sure if I'm going to make it to the end of the year without children running around in the background, but we will see. I'm certainly going to try. But thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, y'all.